The year 2020 was supposed to be an Olympic year, with athletes preparing for the Games, which were scheduled to start in July in Japan. But while organisers were working towards hosting one of the biggest sporting events in the world, at the same time, borders began to close because of the pandemic. Our sports reporter Angela Barnes has been looking at how clubs and sports organisations are coping with the new normal.
Since the pandemic took hold, athletes have been in these training bubbles, for most of this year. And it's something they've adapted to because they've simply had to. So, we've seen in the run-up to events these bio bubbles being created where, tennis, the cycling, cricket, everything, NBA as well in the States. They created these villages and bio bubbles where athletes would have to stay, in the same hotel as well as their staff. They were, restricted, on their movements of where they could go once they were at the venues. And that's something that athletes have just become accustomed to this year. And of course, they don't know when the end is in sight. But one athlete of the athletes I've been speaking to, they've been talking about how they've been using social media a lot more, to try and connect with fans and keep spirits high during this time. And that's something a lot of them have been doing more of. But Shauna Coxey, one of the athletes that we spoke to, she's a sports climber for Team GB. She was supposed to be taking part in the Olympics in Japan in the summer. And of course, it's been hugely disruptive for her, as it has been for all of them. Trying to train, on climbing walls, very difficult. But she told us something very interesting about how she's adapted her training. And here's what she had to say.
For me, actually, training from home is something that's quite familiar. So we've converted our basement into a training space. So we have kind of 2 climbing training walls down there, a pull-up bar, and then fingerboards, which are called like beast makers, which you hang on, and then like a weight set up down there as well. So yeah, training from home is normal, but obviously only training from home isn't normal. So yeah, adapting was kind of not that hard initially, but then when it just kind of carried on, it was hard to keep the motivation up.
Well, there we go. That's just one example of how athletes have been adapting their training programme to cope. And of course, the IOC president has said, the International Olympic Committee president has said that he's very hopeful that fans will be returning, to the Tokyo Olympics next year. Shauna, of course, hopes that will be the case, as do all of the athletes. But fingers crossed at the moment that it will go ahead.
Because it's not just athletes having to make, significant upheavals to their training regimens. Of course, this is really disappointing for the fans who can't get into stadiums, and that's causing major financial headaches for those clubs. How are they adapting operationally to sort of keep themselves running?
Absolutely, Rizzo. I mean, they've been trying to minimise this disruption by, instead of completely cancelling events, postponing them. That's just one way. But the other thing they've been trying to do is get fans safely back into stadiums, into these sports events, because of course, without the fans, that money, that cash flow has been detrimental. We've seen in the English Premier, the English Football League in the UK, those lower League 1 and League 2 clubs really suffering. We've talked about this, quite a lot as we've been following it, that how, they really rely on that money coming in from fans attending their games. And without them, some of them warned that they, wouldn't make it to the end of the season. But thankfully, this week in the UK, we saw the return on Wednesday of about 10,000 fans to 6 games in the English Football League. And then yesterday we heard from the Premier League, who said that they'd actually offered a £50 million bailout to those clubs. But the League 1 and League 2 clubs have said that that's actually not enough.